All right, everybody, this is week 10 of Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. I'm solo this week as Wayne had some life stuff going on that he had to take care of, but I wanted to keep the content coming. This week's going to be my first time that I'm going to talk about my top movies of the year. It's called Mike's Too Early Top 10, and I'm going to name some honorable mentions to start. As everybody knows, I'm a huge movie buff. I love a lot of movies. I like a lot of movies. So it's a big list. It was hard to whittle it down to 10. To be honest, I actually whittled it down to 11, giving the 10th spot to two movies. But we're going to go ahead and go through some honorable mentions to start. Birds of Prey, the Harley Quinn movie. Huge fan of that one. The Old Guard with Charlize Theron on Netflix. Like that movie a lot. Really good action flick. This next movie I'll get into with Wayne at some point. I'm not going to go into it in detail here. Bill and Ted Face the Music. I'm a huge fan. I know some people didn't like it because it was, cheesy, but if you have seen the movies, they are cheesy, and that's just what they are. This next one will probably be an Oscar contender. I thought the movie was pretty good, but definitely do agree that Elizabeth Moss's performance was fantastic in the movie Shirley, which is now on Hulu. Definitely recommend checking it out. The Outpost with Orlando Bloom and Caleb Landry Jones. Good war movie. La Lorna, good horror film, along with Relic. This is, so far, because of COVID, this has been a big year for genre films. So something like La Lorna and Relic, Becky with Kevin James, Underwater with Kristen Stewart, The Wretched, The Lodge, 1BR, which is a new one that just hit Netflix recently, The Beach House, Blood Quantum is a zombie movie, Host is a movie on Shudder, which is like a short film filmed during quarantine, The Platform, another horror film on Netflix, Lost Bullet, a French film I just watched last night, also really good action flick. She Dies Tomorrow, really crazy indie film from Amy Seimetz. Pretty out there, so some people may like it, some people will probably hate it. Get Duked just came out, really like that one. Hamilton, A Secret Love, Buffaloed, Bad Education, Come to Daddy, The Gentleman, Bad Boys for Life, Tiger Tail, The Way Back, Project Power, Palm Springs, and one of my personal favorites didn't make the top 10 list, of course, so you're going to be like, oh, what else do you like? Banana Split. Really good coming-of-age story about two girls who, one is dating the boyfriend, the other one is the ex-girl, a friend of the boyfriend. They become best friends secretly. Really good movie. It's on Netflix. Definitely recommend checking it out. So I'm going to go ahead and get into my too early top 10 of the year. I'm going to start off with number 10, which is two movies, but we'll start with the first movie, which is The King of Staten Island, directed by Judd Apatow, starring Pete Davidson, Bel Powley, Ricky Velez. Just a really good emotional comedy film about Pete Davidson's character, Scott. He grows up, his dad dies in a house fire at a very young age, and so his sister is really young, so she doesn't really remember anything. He has to live through it knowing that his dad, in his opinion, was a great man, and he misses him. So it takes a long time for, even during the movie, he really doesn't kind of discover himself, but it's a process, and that process begins during this movie. And I thought it was just a really well done, acted, written, directed film about loss and grieving and how you move on afterwards. Obviously, it's very funny. Pete Davidson is a very funny person, in my opinion. If you don't like him, probably don't watch it. It hit me emotionally, and when I'm watching a movie and I'm looking for something that's going to be one of my favorite movies of the year, that's kind of what I'm looking for. It's got to hit me in a certain way. And this one, I think it did. And I really enjoyed it, on top of it being very emotional at times. It was a very fun movie. I definitely recommend checking it out. You can rent or buy it right now. Yeah, definitely worth the watch. All right. And the second part of number 10 is I talked about genre films being big this year because of COVID. So my second number 10 is VFW. It's a movie directed by Joe Bagos, written by Max Brolier and Matthew McArdle. It stars Stephen Lane, William Sadler, Fred Williamson, Martin Kove, David Patrick Kelly, George Wendt. It's about a bunch of veterans at a VFW bar that gets overtaken by a gang of drug addicts and drug dealers. They have to defend a woman who is seeking shelter as she's running from these bad guys. And so it's this very B movie action flick horror film but it's elevated to a level that most of those type of movies aren't. Now, they knew they were making a B movie, so they had to keep it at that level. So they couldn't go too high, because then you go too high, it becomes a little too ridiculous. They kept it at the right level. It's a fun movie. Stephen Lang is great as the lead. It's great to see William Sadler and Fred Williamson and Martin Kove and George Wendt. It's very violent, very bloody. If you follow me at all on social media, you know that I talked a lot about a movie called Bliss last year, also directed by Joe Bagos, one of my favorite movies of last year. VFW was, already in the can by the time Bliss came out, and I was waiting to see it. And when I saw it this year, I was not let down. Heck of a movie. You could rent or buy it today. I think it's going to be hitting Shudder at some point in the near future, before the end of the year, maybe early next year. But it's definitely worth your time and worth a watch. All right, so moving on to number 9. Number 9, another genre film. And people may not like that word or like when I say that, but it's big because horror films don't often get recognized. And I think this has been a big year for horror films. And this movie is no slouch here with all the other movies. Elizabeth Moss, I've just talked about how she'll probably get an Oscar nomination for Shirley. I wouldn't be surprised if she got one for this movie too. It's called The Invisible Man, directed by Lee Whannell. I'm a huge fan of his, starring Elizabeth Moss, Oliver Jackson, Harriet Dyer, Aldous Hodge. Great cast overall. Great movie. Elizabeth Moss is fantastic in this movie. It's an edge-of-your-seat thriller. He kind of changes the story of the Invisible Man a little bit, makes it a little more scary, I think. The original Invisible Man movie is probably one of my favorite older horror films. I haven't seen them all yet, but out of the original, Dracula and Frankenstein, I really like The Invisible Man. So this one I think is a nice complement to that. They had to kind of change it in order to make it work, I think, for today's standards. And I think it works really well. And it's just very suspenseful, a lot of fun, lots of action, good horror moments, great special effects. And then you just get Elizabeth Moss being Elizabeth Moss, which is what if you're going to get an actress to do a movie like this where it's basically her the entire movie, you're lucky that you landed her in your movie, because she does the same thing in Shirley. She just eats up the screen. She chews it up, spits it out, takes it back again. It's fantastic. It's really a heck of a ride. I definitely recommend people watch this movie. You could rent or buy that one today as well. Just really good. Check it out. Number 8 is a movie I just saw recently. I really like this movie a lot. It's called Yes, God, Yes. And it's a coming-of-age teen movie starring Stranger Things' Natalie Dyer. She plays a girl who is at a Christian Catholic school, and there's a retreat coming up. And, she's a teenager, and she's got all these hormones, and everything's kind of going through her. She's starting to feel turned on and stuff like that, and she's being told at the same time that that's not right, that she has to wait till she's married to have those feelings, basically. And then she goes to this Christian getaway special camp where she is kind of dragged to by her friend who wants to be recognized as like this great Christian woman. And there's nothing wrong with that, but not everybody's the same. And that's kind of what this movie is about. And it's not just about teenagers going through changes. It's adults too, because we're always constantly evolving as people. And I think it's a good story for anybody to watch, because you see that what teenagers have to go through when they're young, and it does shine a little bit of light on what adults go through. And things that go through their heads is what they're doing right. Is it wrong? Are they going to be punished for this? So I'm not a religious person, and most people that know me know that. But I really like this movie a lot. And I think if you're open to seeing that there are some flaws in religion at times, even as a religious person, I think you'll like this movie. Now, it does deal with sex and sexual feelings and stuff like that. So if that stuff bothers you, then don't watch it. It's directed by Karen Maine, written by her as well. This is her directorial debut. She directed a short film called Yes, God, Yes. So then she turned it into this feature-length movie. She has also wrote the movie Obvious Child, which is also a short film of hers. I think with this movie, I hope that she starts to get recognized even more. I mean, Obvious Child was like 6 years ago, so it's obviously been a while. I know it takes a lot to write a movie. Yes, God, Yes is very good. It's very entertaining. If you like coming-of-age stories, it's definitely one of my favorites of the year. Obviously, it's sitting here in my top 10 so far, which will probably change because there are a lot more movies that come out and a lot of movies I haven't seen yet. But right now, Yes, God, Yes is in there, and it's really good. You could rent or buy it right now. I definitely recommend checking it out. Moving on. I've talked about this movie before when we did rom-coms. I'm going to talk about it again. It's called The Half of It. It sits here at number 7. As soon as I saw this movie, it was one of my favorite movies of the year. And it hasn't really changed. It still sits with me. It's another coming-of-age story. This one more fits into the rom-com area than Yes, God, Yes, but it stars Leah Lewis as Ellie Chu, who is a young lesbian woman who is not out of the closet yet. She is tasked by a guy who thinks she's really smart to help write love letters to a girl that he likes. So to throw a little twist, usually, the guy would fall in love with the girl that he has to write the love letters with. The twist is that obviously she's a lesbian and she's not into him. She's into the girl that she's writing to. Her and the girl have they like the same music, they like the same movies, they like art. They're very entwined with each other. They just don't really know that yet. So they kind of become friends. Obviously, the one girl doesn't know that she's helping this guy get her through love letters and whatnot. It's a really good movie. It's a very timely movie, obviously. Deals with a lot of today's emotions of what's happening in the world today and how people feel and how people aren't always able to be who they want to be around the people they care about, I guess. It's takes some time to get to that. And it really does a good job with just showing how tough it can be growing up. And, we always give the young people a hard time, but we all have to remember at some point or another, we were the young people and we had the hard time, and high school isn't easy. And every time I watch these movies, I'm sitting there with my wife and I usually say, man, high school kids suck. Because they're mean. They can be bullies. But everybody, you also got to remember, everyone's dealing with their own stuff. So even if they're mean or they're bullies, it doesn't even mean that they're bad people. It just means they are also trying to figure it out. And figuring it out is something that I think we do every day. And this movie is a good example of that. And I think the performances are really nice here. I really liked Leah Lewis a lot in this role. She's really good. It's directed and written by Alice Wu. I recommend checking it out. If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. It's a Netflix original. Definitely check it out. All right, so moving on to number 6. I just saw this movie. I've been wanting to see it for a while. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. It's a movie about a girl who gets pregnant and she doesn't want to keep the baby, but she can't get an abortion in her home state of Pennsylvania. So she and her cousin then travel to New York, where someone 17 years old can get an abortion without having her parents' permission. And she goes about doing that. Now, it's a very subtle, it's a very quiet movie. It deals with sexual assault. It deals with abortion. Two things obviously not very entertaining. It's not what I would call an entertaining movie. It's a movie about people. Now, obviously, these are actors, but they do a really good job of becoming these characters, and you feel for them as if they are real people. It's directed by Eliza Hittman and written by her as well. The main stars are Talia Ryder, who plays the cousin Skylar, and Sydney Flanagan, who plays Autumn. Now, there's some early talk. Again, it's way too early Oscar prediction. Sydney Flanagan's name has been tossed around for Best Actress, and I would not have a problem with that. I think she's really good here. It's her first movie, and she does a fantastic job. Again, it's a very quiet performance. Both these girls, they live in like a small town. They don't seem to have very great lives, and they're kind of suffering in silence. And it's, there's a certain point where they do smile, and you're just like, wow. Like, this is, and you realize at that moment when you're watching it, you're like, this is the first time they've been, like, happy at all in this movie. So it's not a very happy fun movie. It is, it's something pretty heavy. No matter what your stance is on abortion, obviously, if you're really against it, then you probably won't want to watch this movie. But it's just really well done. It's really well written. It looks really good. I mean, it does have like the shaky cam effect to it, but that's because it's trying to get that effect of like you're walking in a day of these people's lives. And that camera moving like that makes you really feel like you're there and you're just kind of watching them as they walk through this huge decision that she had to make and that they had to like basically go on their own and not tell anybody. And it can be hard to watch at times, that's for sure. But there isn't anything like too disturbing, I would say, like visually, but there are some moments where you're just like, oh man, like this is rough. Like it would be hard to watch these girls go through this and not do anything about it. Like this is how are they alone in this situation? But really good movie. You could rent or buy it right now. All right, so now we get to the top 5. Might be some picks people don't really like. Number 5, though, I think is one. It still sticks with me to this day. I saw it a couple months ago, and it has a very controversial actor, because a lot of people think he's a very terrible actor. The movie is called Color Out of Space. It is directed by Richard Stanley, based on a story by H.P. Lovecraft, and written by Richard Stanley and Scarlett Amaras. Richard Stanley is known for basically not directing a movie. He was hired to direct The Island of Dr. Moreau with Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer. And things went awry on that movie set. Sets were destroyed. There were floods. There was actors who were crazy, mainly Brando and Kilmer. It was just a nightmare. Richard Stanley was removed. He was replaced by somebody else. They actually made a documentary about the whole situation, and they interviewed Richard Stanley, and it's a really good documentary. So he makes this triumphant return here with Color Out of Space. It stars Nicolas Cage, Joel D. Richardson, Madeline Arthur, Elliot Knight, Tommy Chong, Brendan Meyer. It is a science fiction, horror, crazy-ass, nutty film, and it's amazing. Visually, it's stunning. The cinematography is fantastic. The editing is just crazy. The performances are amazing. Like, Nick Cage he's definitely on the level of Mandy. If you haven't seen Mandy, one of my favorite movies of 2018, he's definitely on that level here, like he was then. And it doesn't come till later, really. But when he gets there, you're just like, whoa, watch out. It just does so many cool, crazy things. Great direction by Stanley in this one. Great special effects for a movie that was, it's not like a huge, big budget blockbuster, but they got really cool special effects. Interesting role for Tommy Chong here. He plays a guy that like lives in a shed. Really just crazy, crazy movie. If you have seen any of Stuart Gordon's H.P. Lovecraft adaptations, you can kind of imagine how crazy this movie can get. And it goes there and beyond. It is way crazier, I think, even than some of Stuart's work. And I definitely think people should watch this movie. It just hit Shudder, I think, yesterday. If you have Shudder, check it out. Watch this movie. I love this movie. It is number 5, so I love this movie. You got to imagine how I feel about the other movies. Check it out. It's super cool. You may be disappointed. I don't know. It's one of those movies I think people are going to love it or hate it. I loved it, obviously. You need to see it. All right, so moving on to number 4. Number 4 is a movie I already talked about a little bit on the podcast. I'm going to talk about it again because it's my number 4 movie of the year so far. Number 4 is a movie. It's a Netflix original. It's out of Poland, and it's called The Hater. The Hater is a movie about this kid who meets up with this girl who his family used to know, or they used to vacation. Her family used to vacation where his family lived, and so he kind of hooks up with them, and he's weird, and he spies on them, which is strange because he wants to know what they think about him. And he falls for the girl, and she doesn't like him because he's creepy. But then he's not creepy, and she does like him. But then he starts working for a company that finds dirt on people. They get paid to find bad things out about other people, scandalous stuff like political stuff. And he kind of enters this weird world where he stalks people, he finds out their weaknesses and exposes them. Obviously, you don't know that he's exposed you. He kind of wedges his way into both worlds. So he's like on the side of the people he's trying to expose, and he's also trying, on the side of the people that want him exposed. It's this weird world that he walks through, and he does some very bad things. It's about morals. It's about society. It's about the internet today and how easily it is to like manipulate people through that. It does, I believe, what the Joker was trying to do last year. It does that a lot better, and I like this movie a lot more. Now, some people will call this character an anti-hero. He's not a hero. This guy is not a hero. He's a bad dude. An incel would probably be what mostly you compare him to, but he does kind of come out of his shell a little bit, so he kind of escapes that. But he's that in the beginning. He's an incel in the beginning, and then he kind of comes out of his shell, and he's not that as much, and he really kind of wants to be this better person, but then something happens, and he can't take it back. And he still wants to be this better person, so he kind of pushes it all to the side. A normal person that would actually feel guilt about it. He doesn't really feel that guilty about it. It's a really good movie. It's long, but if you can watch subtitles and you like thinking during your movies and you like different movies, it's definitely worth watching. The Hater on Netflix. Check it out. Really good movie. If you like something like the Joker, I think you'll like it. I didn't care for the Joker, but that has nothing to do with this movie. This movie is fantastic. Definitely watch this movie as soon as you can. Hence why it's in my top 5. Moving on, number 3, another movie I just saw recently. This movie surprised me. It's called The Vast of Night. The Vast of Night is a Amazon original movie. It's an indie sci-fi film about aliens coming to Earth and taking people, but it's told in such a different way. Like, it's such a simple way to explain this movie. It's told like it's a story of a show similar to like Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits. You see a lot of scenes on like an old tube TV, which are really cool because they're like black and white, and the screen's bouncing, and then it will zoom in and it'll go to widescreen, like it's an actual movie you're watching. It's just really inventive, really creative. It shows what you can do with a small budget. The camera work in this movie is fantastic. There's a lot, like, you forget that they cut because there's a lot of long shots that look like oneers, and then all of a sudden you're at like a different angle and you don't even remember that they cut the movie, but they did because they had to. There was no way they were going to get around that. But they do lots of long, wide shots, and it really works to set the atmosphere for this movie. It has really good performances from lesser-known actors. Actually, I'm just realizing right now that Sierra McCormick, who is the main character in The Vast of Night, is also the main character in VFW, who's hiding from the bad guys. So she is in 2 films on my top 10 list, and I didn't even know that. She's really good in this performance as Faye Crocker, and then Jake Horowitz plays Everett Sloan. Those are the 2 main characters. They're both really good. You kind of have to believe them to kind of get into this story. And it takes a little bit to get going in the beginning. There's a lot of setup, a lot of conversations back and forth. That's where a lot of the cool camera angles come in. But this movie really was that good. Because it was one of those ones that was sitting at the top of all the IMDb ratings and Rotten Tomatoes. And I'm like, is it really that good? And it is. It is really that good. I fell in love with this movie. Another sci-fi movie, another genre movie on the list. That's, I think, what we're going to be having a lot this year. Again, like I said, because a lot of movies have been delayed and postponed. But this one, if you have Amazon Prime, you could watch it right now, and I highly recommend it. You won't be disappointed if you like original sci-fi films. Really cool movie. Lots of cool things to admire about it. Definitely check it out. The Vast of Night. Number 3. Directed by Andrew Patterson and written by Andrew Patterson and Craig W. Sanger, too. Moving on to number 2. Now, this is a movie that has been controversial for some reason. I don't get it, but I have a close friend of mine who's not a fan of it. And maybe there are other close friends of mine that aren't fans of this movie. But I love this movie. I just finished watching it yesterday. It is the new Spike Lee movie written by Danny Bilson, Paul DeMeo, Kevin Wilmot, Spike Lee. It's called The Five Bloods. It stars Delroy Lindo, Jonathan Majors, Clark Peters, Norm Lewis, Isaiah Whitlock Jr., Melanie Thierry, Paul Walter Hauser, Jasper Pekonen, Johnny Wynn, and of course, and it's unfortunate to have to say this, but because it sucks, the late Chadwick Boseman, who, since I watched this after he passed away, he looms large over this movie. And if the premise is his character is dead in the beginning of the movie. These men are going back to find his body and find some gold that they left there with his body. And they want to bring him and the gold home. It's an action, adventure, war flick, but it's not told in a normal way. The flashback scenes with Boseman are shot in 4:3 and look like, to me, a cross between an A-Team episode and old Vietnam footage that you would see if I took a class where I had to watch a lot of Vietnam old school footage. That's what it reminded me of. It's very cheesy looking. They degraded on purpose to make it look old and bad. The action sequences in that are bad, but that's on purpose. It's to make it look like an A-Team style action flick. That's what I liked about this movie a lot. He uses 3 different aspect ratios to shoot this one movie, which is something that nobody would normally do. You would actually think someone like a Quentin Tarantino would do that. And Spike Lee here, he gives us a movie that's not straightforward. And I like that about this movie. The performances I thought were fantastic. Delroy Lindo really stands out. He's maybe a little over the top early on, but he kind of settles into his role as the movie goes. And he really just, like, some of the stuff, he does some stuff like straight into the camera, because he's a character that talks to himself and he's kind of losing it because he's a Vietnam vet, and a lot of them unfortunately had a lot of mental issues, and he's no different in this movie. And I thought he was fantastic. I enjoyed the fact that when they went back into the old war, like the 4:3 war scenes, that they actually had the older actors play their younger selves without really doing much makeup work. It's obvious that, Boseman, I think, his character is supposed to be younger than them, but obviously they looked a lot different back in the 60s than they do in 2020. But they decided just to shoot it like that because he wanted to, I think, have those actors have the interaction with him, since Boseman is mainly only in those scenes. He didn't want to have Boseman act with other younger actors. He wanted to keep it as he's acting with Delroy and Clark and Isaiah. It's a really well done movie. It's really long. I think that's one of the reasons people have an issue with it. I didn't feel the length in it, but it is over 2.5 hours. It's just such an interesting movie. Obviously, it's Spike Lee. It's about racism. It deals with modern racism. It deals with racism back in the 60s. It deals with racism throughout history. And it really does a good job, I think, of that, and showing, how these guys, it doesn't show as much how they were treated when they came home from Vietnam, but it shows how they felt. Because you don't see like them getting off the plane or anything like that, like you would in something that's like Born on the 4th of July, where, they're treated like crap. They were treated like crap, and they tell us that, and you kind of see it in their demeanor and how some of them have handled it over the years, and how losing their buddy Stormin' Norman, played by Chadwick Boseman, really affected their lives. And I think it's really well done. It's a different movie, and I think people were expecting more of a straightforward war flick when they went into this movie, and that's not what it is at all. Spike gets a little artistic here, a little more so than he usually does. I think it really works for this movie. I think you're going to see quite a few Oscar nominations coming out of this movie, especially as a lot of movies were pushed back to next year. This one, I think, is going to hold strong. Probably at least see Delroy Lindo nominated. Most likely the movie will be nominated. It's really good, really well done. The performances are fantastic. Check it out on Netflix. It's a Netflix original. Like I said, I like talking about these types of movies because 92% of critics really love this movie, and they gave it's a Metascore of like 87 or something like that, which is really high. That's like an average of what critics think of this movie, and that's really good. But then on the other side, the audience rating is 53%. So the audience is not feeling this movie, with the exception of me, obviously, and a few other people, I'm assuming. I definitely don't see what they see. But hey, that's why we watch movies, right? Opinions are opinions. We all have our own opinions. The one thing I will say, I wish people would stop trying to pass their opinion off as a fact. Your opinion is only a fact to you. It's not a fact to everybody else. You can question why people like the movie, but you can't say that they only like it for this reason because you didn't like it, so obviously, therefore, it's a bad movie. And this movie kind of falls in that category. Killing Them Softly is another one that this movie reminded me of, is a Brad Pitt mobster movie that critics liked a lot and fans hated. So it's always hard to tell who's right. No one's right, really. It's only right to you. So this movie is my number 2 movie of the year so far to me. Other people can hate it. They can come at me about it. I really don't care. I thought it was fantastic. The Five Bloods. Check it out on Netflix. And here we go. Number 1. This is a movie I saw early in the year. It's called Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And it's directed by Celine Sciamma and written by her as well. And it is a movie about these rich people that like hire this girl to like look after their daughter/sister who has issues, and she's a little nutty, I guess, but this woman has to look after her, and she's a painter too, and that's where the portrait part comes in. And these two women end up having this connection, this relationship, and it's such a powerful movie, visually stunning. Where they shot it is just very cinematic. It looks very cinematic, and the performances are fantastic. I'm going to try these names. Sorry if I don't say them correctly. Nomi Merlant, Adele Haenel, Luana Bajrami, Valeria Golino, who I do actually know from the Hot Shots movies. She plays Charlie Sheen's girlfriend in those movies. She is in this movie as the mother. But these two main characters, Marianne and Heloise, have this great relationship, and it does end up turning romantic. It's a very powerful romance movie. It's kind of, you would think it's typical, but it's not. It feels like something I haven't seen before. And the way that it was shot and the way that it was acted, it just feels very modern for a movie that takes place a long time ago. It's on an isolated island in Brittany at the end of the 18th century. A female painter is obliged to paint a wedding portrait of a young woman. So she's hired to paint this portrait of this young woman, and she ends up falling for her. And they end up falling for each other. And it's just a really great film. And it still stands out. I saw this probably in February, so we're now talking like 7 months ago, and it still sticks out in my brain. My wife had watched it first, and then she was like, oh, it's really good. And I honestly, at the time, I wouldn't have expected to watch this movie and think it would be my favorite movie of the year, but it's really that good. And if you haven't seen it, I definitely think you should check it out. It's on Hulu. It's such a good, if you like romance movies, it's such a good romance movie. Great drama, great acting, great, like I said, great cinematography. It looks really good, and I highly, highly recommend this movie. All right, everybody, there's my 2 early top 10 of 2020. There's a lot of good movies out this year, a lot of great movies out this year. People just need to find them, and they're a lot easier to find because a lot of them are hitting Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime. Check them out. When I post this to Instagram, I'll post the posters and stuff, so you'll be able to see what the movies are. All right, so I'm going to do the things that we normally do at the end. I'm not going to talk about someone who's passed away because Wayne and I, we saved that for Gone But Not Forgotten will be something that we do together. All right, so I'm going to talk about some of the things that we normally talk about. It's just be a quick wrap-up. The deaths this week: Joe Ruby, co-creator of Scooby-Doo; Norm Spencer, voice of the animated Cyclops in the X-Men animated cartoon. Obviously, the big news this week was Chadwick Boseman. Wayne and I will have something special about him in an episode or two, depending on when we get back to doing this together. I'm looking forward to that because there's a lot to talk about with him. And I'm going to go through the news and notes for this week. I'll start with the news this week. Adam Pally tapped to play John Belushi in biopic. Ike Barinholtz to play Dan Aykroyd, and Aubrey Plaza to play John Belushi's wife. So that's very interesting. They've been trying to work on this movie for a long time. Be interesting to see how it turns out. I like Adam Pally a lot. Movie theaters have reopened. Unhinged and New Mutants are the first two movies to be released in theaters, and Unhinged got really good reviews and did okay, boxed like 4 million, which is pretty good. New Mutants got tanked on reviews and made about $7 million, so I have a feeling we'll be seeing these movies hit VOD or DVD or Blu-ray very soon. Texas Chainsaw Remake changes director's week into shooting. That's pretty big. You know, they got 1 week in, they fired the directors, they hired somebody else. They got the cast is finally filling out in that one, so we'll see how that turns out. Resident Evil has officially been announced as a Netflix TV series. They've been talking about that for what seems like forever, but they finally got it going, and be interested to see when that comes out and how that looks. Kelly Marie Tran from Star Wars will be the first Southeast Asian actress to lead an animated Disney film. It's called Raya and the Last Dragon. So look out for that one in the near future. The Kingsman moves from September to February 26th of 2021. First Dune trailer will be September 9th, so next week. Haunted Mansion reboot is in the works. Arnold Schwarzenegger has a new TV show, which is a spy thriller for Skydance Entertainment. All right, movies coming out. This list is a little short, but we're going to go through it. 40-Year-Old Version, which was a hit at Sundance, and obviously is a play on 40-Year-Old Virgin, will hit Netflix October 9th. It's like an indie film, so it's not like a spoof movie or anything. It's an indie film that just took the name, and it's supposed to be pretty good. Come Play is a horror film, will be out this Halloween. The Queen's Gambit is a limited series that hits Netflix on October 23rd, starring Anya Taylor-Joy, who I'm a huge fan of. The Dark and the Wicked comes out November 6th from the director of The Strangers. The Swerve hits VOD September 22nd. The Doorman with Ruby Rose hits October 9th. The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is the sequel series to The Haunting of Hill House, will be out October 9th from Mike Flanagan on Netflix. Flanagan produced this series and the first series. He directed most of the first series. He's only, I think, directs a couple in this season. There's no connection. It's anthology series, so you'll have some of the same actors return, a la like American Horror Story, but the characters are all different. It's a different adaptation. I love Haunting of Hill House. I cannot wait for this show. I'm really excited that it's coming out in about a month. That's our show for the week. Thank you for listening to Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. Hopefully Wayne will be back next week, and we'll get back doing the show the way we normally do. Thanks for listening. Have a great week.